Thank you for joining me for another Conversations Quick Hits. Today, I would like to talk about presenteeism. Is it just people slacking off, or is there more to it than that? Tim, kick us off.
So, presenteeism is turning up without being there. So, what does that mean? Well, it sort of means where we all have somebody in the office who's there, as in their body is there, their arms and legs are there, their head's there, their eyes are there. There's some noise coming from their keyboard, but actually, are they delivering 10%, 15%? Maybe they're not delivering anything. Maybe they're wandering up and down the corridor just chatting to people and not really working towards the goal of the business. So, presenteeism is those people that turn up but aren't there. There is an angle to it though, which is around, is this person not well? Maybe, is there a sort of sickness to it? So an element of, could this person just be lethargic, and that be related to some mental behavior, or perhaps just a dehydration issue, or some longer term, maybe issues at home and things like that. So it's a multifaceted issue around, how people can turn up for whatever reason and then get accused of being a slacker when it may or may not be their fault. So the discussion really here is it slacking, or should we find out more? And then also, is it just the way some people are? I'm not sure.
I knew someone when I worked in a call center. We realized too long down the road than we should have that he was coming into work, signing onto his computer, and then leaving for the day. He wasn't actually there, but he was being paid because he was signed onto the computer.
Wow. Yeah. I think the problem, it could be twofold. It could be, personal issues. So you could be dealing with financial issues. You could be dealing with medical issues. You could be dealing with all kinds of problems that are outside the workplace that are distracting you from kind of giving it your full attention. But it could also be just things that in the company that are really pulling at your motivation, that are just really kind of distracting you. So, either maybe you don't have the tools that you need to do the job, or maybe the expectations are too high, or maybe the expectations are too low, or maybe you're overqualified for the job that you have. So a lot of those things could just, kind of eat away at your motivation, so that you're giving it 50% or 40% or 20%.
I agree with both perspectives of what Tim mentioned. Let me make sure. Yeah, Tim, about finding out. I think that's what's really most important. And we don't do enough of that. We don't do enough learning. Let's find out why this person is that way. One thing that I've noticed, and it just appears this is how society tends to be, people often boast about not doing much at work, or going to work and not feeling like being there. So it's almost viewed as something to sort of celebrate. You don't want to be the person who comes in and just, works all day, works from start to finish, but you can gossip, you can talk with or whoever, and there may not be, in some cases, any deep issues going on, but you want to stay with that. You want to be able to continue to, in that space of, yeah, I went to work and I hate my job and all this and all this. So you want to be able to stay there because you have more to talk about with certain people, rather than, oh yeah, I went to my job and I did all this and that, because then that's not as much. You might not be just, depending on your circle, there may not be as many there to be able to, converse like that with.
You could have people on the job who basically hate the job, but they're only there because they need the paycheck.
Yeah, that's a good example of presenteeism, I think. Are they putting in 110, whatever we call it, percent? Or maybe not. I think the other thing is, it sounds to me like presenteeism is one of those sort of buzzword coveralls that we use that has a slightly unpleasant edge to it, is in, they're just turning up, but they're not in full capacity, or whatever it might be. It just covers everything, doesn't it? Whereas actually, I think Robert's spot on. It's a case of, hang on a minute, if the word presenteeism pops out and it's allocated to a person, what we need to do then is, almost the immediate next step is to sit down and say, how's it going? What's going on? Do you think you can do more here? Because as Rick said, is it feasible this person is just not capable of any more? What you're expecting, your expectation of them is not in line with their ability to deliver. You've labeled it presenteeism, when actually it's a skills gap, or it's something else that needs addressing. So I think, if we hear the term presenteeism, it should be very shortly followed up by a find out first.
And if you're an especially motivated person who is looking for new challenges, and your job appears to be like a dead end, you've kind of plateaued, your motivation is definitely going to drop, and you're just going to be going through the motions. Because especially if you feel that there's really nowhere to go except out, you're just going to, bide your time until you can find the next job.
And is that true if there's a lot of red tape where people have to like go through the swamp to be able to figure anything out? Do they just stop doing it because it's too much work to actually accomplish anything other than just press the button that says, I was here?
Sure.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is people who are just sitting out their retirement. I've done the 45 years I need to get my pension for X. And if I just stick it out another 2 years, then if I leave, I lose it all, and I don't want to. So therefore, I'm just going to stick this out for 5 years and get all the things I'm entitled to when I retire. And that really is just treading water. That is true presenteeism. I'm just getting through this.
Yes, and as far as coming from recently retired military, and I love the job that I was doing prior to retiring. So that was the one time I was actually able to, and it was a sort of rough time to retire at that point because I finally got to do what I wanted to do. How that ties into this is that, when retirement with us 18, 19, 20 years comes about, yes, there are a lot of people who are just going through the motions, and they're very open about it too. They're not ashamed of it. It seems to be something, again, celebrated. So that's very common. One thing I wanted to add too is that we know it has a lot to do with, it can have a lot to do with personnel at work, your bosses and so forth, the different things going on there. It could be leadership, something else that I see a lot, and I know other occupations see this as well, but with us moving so often and other personnel doing the same, I've seen leadership do a complete 360 with one person leaving. One person leaving, someone else comes in, and everything's completely different. Attitudes change, morale changes, and so on. So I believe that could have a lot to do with it as well. It could be a completely, fully well-functioning person who is simply going based on his or her leadership.
So does corporate culture then affect presenteeism?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. There could be a lot of barriers that force people out. For example, is there a glass ceiling for women? And if they reach a certain plateau and there's nothing available, they either move on or you sit there and just kind of, go through the motions. If the company has, diversity and equity, and inclusion is non-existent, or it's just a campaign or just a program, and they don't really embody what they say they represent, that can create a problem. If they don't have a formal program in place to identify talent and provide the training that people need to kind of move to the next level, that can be a demotivating factor as well.
So does allowing presenteeism create a loss of good talent?
I think so. And I think it also affects the motivation of other people, because they look at that person and say, well, that person's getting paid more than me, and they're doing like 25% of the work. When I first started in my career, I worked for a bank that had several employees that had 50 years on the job. And they weren't the ones that were coasting. It was the people who were in their 30s who were coasting to retirement. It was crazy.
I think it's
go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, it's good you use the term inclusion there, because I think there's a piece in here, like all these things, that every individual has a story. And, inclusion isn't about one group of people or another group of people. It's about every individual being different. And in this case of presenteeism, again, every presenteeism case is different. And so therefore, what we need to do is seek first to understand.
Yes.
And then to further. So I think the inclusion piece fits really well there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like we're saying that presenteeism may or may not be the person being a slacker. It could be there's a whole host of other opportunities, and that as leaders, we're responsible to go in and find out what's going on without being super demanding about you're being a slacker, but instead like what's going on with you. Now, that's not to say there aren't people who are slackers. So make that really clear. There are people who are slackers. I could go on a rampage about that, but that is our 10 minutes. So I do want to cut us off there. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me and not engaging in presenteeism. I'll talk to you all again soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.